The Vorka called it the final solution. A toxin, precision-engineered to wipe out humanity without leaving a single body to rot. It was a marvel of alien biochemistry, a molecule so specific it could snake through the bloodstream, unravel neural pathways, and shut down vital functions with surgical efficiency. They released it over Xiphos 9 with ceremonial precision, watching from their high thrones as black mist rolled across the ruins of humanity's last stronghold. The Vorka warlord High Executor Zalvar stood on the command deck of his warship, gaze fixed on the massive holodisplay. The human problem was over. Then, on a cracked city street below, a man raised a steel flask to his lips and drank deep. Captain Rourke Voss exhaled as the Vorka poison burned down his throat, thick as tar and twice as bitter. He swallowed again, letting the concoction settle into his gut, waiting for death. It didn't come. He wiped his mouth, cracked his neck, and gave the Vorka scouts watching him the same smirk he had given death 100 times before. Tastes like disappointment. The aliens didn't react at first. They weren't built for confusion. But when their primary execution method failed to work, the Vorka panicked. A chorus of shrill, clicking voices erupted from the enemy's comms. Scouts scrambled back, broadcasting urgent messages to their command network. They had seen humans survive bullets, bombs, even starvation. But not this. The Vorka had promised their poison was flawless. That promise had just shattered. Rourke clicked his radio. Looks like the bastards didn't do their homework. A voice crackled back. Sergeant Egan. I don't know if that's the dumbest thing you've ever done, sir, or the most impressive. It's both. Now get ready, we just kicked the hornet's nest. Above the battlefield, Zalvar's warship fell silent. His attendants, tall, gaunt creatures draped in the silken regalia of their empire, stared at the hollow feed, aghast. The human should have been writhing in agony. The toxin should have stripped his body from the inside out. Instead, he was standing there, mocking them. Zalvar exhaled through his mandibles. Slowly, deliberately. Replay the feed. His second-in-command hesitated. Executor, this is not possible. The warlord's gaze turned razor-sharp. Did I ask for your commentary? The officer stiffened, then obeyed. The footage looped. It was no illusion. The human had drunk their weapon and survived. Zalvar's claws flexed. He knew human resilience was infamous, but this was beyond absurd. It was an insult. Deploy a kill squad. Bring me that human alive. Rourke heard the incoming ships before he saw them. A ripple in the ashen clouds. The distant wail of Vorka strike craft, sleek and sharp, knifing through the sky like predatory birds. He tapped his radio. We've got company. Sergeant Egan's voice cut through the static. Took him long enough. 100 meters ahead, a shattered skyscraper loomed over the city ruins. The structure was barely standing, its glass skeleton stripped to jagged steel ribs. That was their trap. Rourke sprinted for it, boots pounding against cracked pavement. Behind him, Vorka dropships broke through the smog, their engines screaming. Positions. Now. Egan and the rest of Echo Team melted into the rubble, rifles locking into place. They were ghosts in the ruins, camouflaged by the wreckage of a world long since abandoned. Rourke vaulted through a broken window just as the first Vorka enforcers touched down. 7 feet tall. Bio-augmented exoskeletons. Their armor plates pulsed with a sickly blue glow, the mark of their empire's elite. They moved fast, but Echo Team was faster. Thunder cracked. The ambush hit hard. Armor-piercing rounds punctured Vorka plating, sending 3 enforcers down before they even turned. Suppressing fire tore through the air. One Vorka swung around, mandibles clattering as it fired its pulse rifle, but Rourke was already moving. He hit the ground in a roll, came up with his sidearm, and put 2 rounds through its skull. Headshot. Another Vorka roared, charging at Egan's position. The sergeant ducked, primed a grenade, and sent it flying into the creature's open mouth. A second later, alien viscera painted the street. The last few enforcers tried to regroup, too late. Rourke's team mopped them up in seconds. Bodies slumped, weapons fell silent. Then, the radio clicked. Bad news. Boss, we got a problem. Egan stood over a Vorka corpse, yanking a data module from its armor. His face was grim. Rourke took it. His gut told him it was worse than bad. He tapped his wrist console and decrypted the module. Lines of Vorka script flooded the screen. One word repeated over and over. Immune. Rourke's breath slowed. This wasn't just a failed execution attempt. This was a research mission. They had deployed the toxin not just to kill, but to test. And now, they had confirmed that a human had survived. Which meant one thing. They weren't going to stop until they knew why. Above, aboard the warship, Zalvar clenched his claws. The human must be captured. His attendants hesitated. Executor, if the toxin has failed, then we must find out why. His voice was a blade against steel. If one human is immune, there could be others. Xiphos 9 was supposed to be the end of the war. A simple extermination. A footnote in history. Instead, it had just become a proving ground. Deploy the Vorka hunter. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the name. The Vorka's deadliest assassin. A nightmare given form. Rourke exhaled, eyes on the storm above. He had survived the Vorka's final solution. But now, something worse was coming. He tapped his rifle. All right, boys. Time to move. Egan glanced at him. Where to? Rourke grinned. Straight into hell. The Vorka hunter had arrived. Rourke could feel it before he saw it. The air itself changed, thicker, heavier, charged with something primal. An unnatural stillness spread across the ruined city as if the planet itself was holding its breath. He crouched behind a shattered wall, fingers flexing against the grip of his rifle. Echo team had scattered, taking up defensive positions, but something about this hunt felt different. Sergeant Egan's voice crackled through the radio. Boss. I don't like this. Neither did Rourke. Vorka assassins weren't deployed lightly. This was personal. And when the Vorka made it personal, people died. Above them, in the decimated skyline, the hunter moved. It clung to the steel bones of a ruined high-rise, silent as a shadow. Tall even by Vorka standards, its exoskeleton was sleek, black, and void-like, drinking in the dim light. A living weapon. It had no name, no rank, no insignia. The Vorka didn't name their nightmares. It was a legend among human forces. Vorka hunters didn't kill for sport, for orders, or for pleasure. They killed because they had never failed to do so. The hunter's mandibles clicked, sending the air. It had its prey. Rourke's wrist console pulsed with an incoming message. A transmission, human, encrypted. That was unexpected. He tapped the receiver, and a woman's voice filled his earpiece. Dr. Nylakore. Captain, if you want to live, you need to move. Now. His eyes narrowed. I don't run. Then you'll die. Rourke looked up. For a split second, something flickered in the smog, a shape, just barely visible. Predator's instinct screamed in his gut. He threw himself backward just as the wall exploded. The hunter struck. A blur of motion, black steel slicing through the air. Rourke barely rolled aside as a blade buried itself where his head had been a heartbeat earlier. He came up firing, 3 shots, center mass. The hunter wasn't there anymore. The bastard moved like smoke, disappearing into the ruins. Rourke's breathing steadied. This wasn't a brute force fight. The Vorka had sent something surgical. A scalpel instead of a hammer. Egan's voice roared in his earpiece. Contact. West side, moving fast. Gunfire erupted. Echo team was under siege. Inside the ruins, Dr. Nylakore worked fast. She was holed up in an abandoned Vorka biolab, scavenging through a data core ripped straight from an alien mainframe. The numbers scrolling across her screen confirmed her worst fears. Rourke hadn't survived the toxin because of luck. He had survived because something inside him had changed. Project Revenant. It had been buried, classified, erased, forgotten. A last-ditch effort from the old war, a genetic enhancement project meant to accelerate human adaptability. It had never been completed. Never tested. Until now. She slammed the console shut. There wasn't time. She had to get to Rourke. Because if the Vorka found out what he was becoming, they wouldn't just kill him. They'd tear him apart to find out how to make more. Rourke sprinted through the ruins, dodging falling debris as the hunter ripped through his squad. Corporal Diaz's scream cut short, a wet, ugly sound. Rourke swung around the corner, rifle raised, just in time to see the hunter step out of the smoke. 7 feet of Vorka perfection. Its mandibles flexed, and it tilted its head, examining him. Not attacking. Studying. Rourke exhaled. It wanted something. You're not here to kill me. The hunter's voice rasped, deep and insectal. Not yet. A cold certainty settled in his gut. The Vorka weren't guessing anymore. They knew. They knew the toxin should have killed him. They knew it hadn't. And they wanted to know why. Tell me, human, the hunter hissed. What are you? Rourke spat blood and grinned. Your worst goddamn nightmare. He threw the detonator. A flash grenade erupted between them, blinding light, concussive force. Rourke moved before the dust settled, diving through an alley, feet pounding against rubble. Time to go. Dr. Nyla Corey was waiting at the rendezvous point. She was younger than he expected, mid-30s, dark hair tied back, eyes like burning steel. He barely slowed as she waved him forward. We need to leave, now. I need answers first. No, you need to survive first. She shoved a data pad into his hands. The file name sent ice down his spine. Project Revenant, status, active. His jaw clenched. I thought this was shut down. It was. But something in your DNA says otherwise. She tapped a sequence on her tablet, bringing up a gene mapping chart. Mutations. Rapid adaptation markers. You didn't resist the toxin, Captain, she said quietly. You absorbed it. The words landed like a hammer blow. Rourke exhaled, slow and measured. The Vorka's greatest weapon hadn't just failed. It had made him stronger. He turned to the distant horizon, where Vorka warships loomed like vultures. They thought they were hunting a dying species. They didn't realize they had just created something worse. Above, aboard the warship, Zalvar processed the latest report. The hunter had failed to capture the human. That was unprecedented. The High Executor's claws clicked against the steel of his throne. Accelerate the next phase. Deploy all forces. If one human can resist the toxin, we must burn them all. His second-in-command hesitated. Executor, if we act too quickly, we risk. Did I ask for your hesitation? The officer stiffened. Zalvar's mandibles flexed. He was done playing games. I want the human broken. I want his blood analyzed. And if I must burn this world to get it, so be it. Rourke locked eyes with Dr. Corey. We need to hit them first, he said. She hesitated. That's suicide. He cracked his knuckles. No, Doc. That's humanity. Egan chimed in over comms. What's the plan, boss? Rourke grinned. We take the fight to them. Rourke stood at the edge of a ruined overpass, the wind whipping dust and smoke around him. Below, the Vorka war column moved, dozens of dropships, their armor glistening under the smog-covered sky, marching toward what remained of human resistance. They weren't just hunting him anymore. They were erasing everything. He clicked his comm status. Egan's voice came through, tense but steady. All teams in position. We hit M on your mark. Dr. Nyla Corey stood beside him, arms crossed. You know this is insane, right? Rourke gave a humorless chuckle. You're just figuring that out? She shoved a data chip into his palm. If we don't make it, this has everything on Project Revenant. Get it off-world. Make sure humanity knows what it's becoming. He glanced at her. And what exactly am I becoming? Her eyes hardened. The future. The Vorka war column advanced. The lead craft hovered above the cracked streets, its reinforced hull bristling with heavy cannons. Dozens of Vorka enforcers marched in formation, weapons drawn, mandibles clattering in anticipation. At the front of the line, the hunter moved with predatory grace, scanning the ruins. It had failed once. It would not fail again. The human is near. High Executor Zalvar's voice crackled over their comms. Crush him. The Vorka charged. Rourke's trap snapped shut. Boom. The first explosion ripped through the leading dropship, turning it into a fireball of twisting metal and shrieking Vorka. Shrapnel shredded the enforcers below, severing limbs, punching through armor. Then the gunfire began. Echo Team unleashed hell from the rooftops, heavy rounds hammering down. Vorka bodies hit the dirt fast. Rourke moved before the dust settled, dropping into the fray like a meteor. His rifle kicked against his shoulder. 1, 2, 3 shots, each finding their mark. A Vorka lunged at him, he sidestepped, grabbed its own momentum, and drove a combat knife into its throat. Egan's voice roared over the comm, push him back. The fight was turning. Vorka weren't used to losing. And that made them sloppy. Above, Zalvar watched from his warship, livid. This should have been a purge, not a battle. But the humans were still fighting. Still winning. His claws clicked against the control panel. No more patience. No more restraint. Orbital bombardment. Now. Dr. Nyla Corey's eyes widened as she picked up the energy spike. They're targeting us from orbit. Rourke wiped blood from his face. How long? 2 minutes. Maybe less. Egan's voice cut in. Boss, we got a new problem, more dropships inbound. Rourke clenched his jaw. They weren't supposed to survive this long. The Vorka were bringing everything to this fight. No running. No hiding. They had to finish this. Now. The hunter moved through the battlefield like a wraith. Rourke felt it before he saw it. A blur of motion, then a flash of steel. The hunter was on him. They crashed through rubble, grappling, striking, breaking bones. The Vorka's speed was inhuman, but Rourke was faster. His body had changed. The toxin hadn't killed him, it had rewritten him. He felt stronger. Sharper. Faster. The hunter's blade flashed, Rourke caught its wrist, twisted, and snapped the joint. The alien recoiled, for the first time, it looked afraid. Rourke grabbed a fallen Vorka plasma rifle, turned it on the hunter, and fired. The shot burned straight through its chest. The Vorka assassin fell. Rourke stood over it, breathing hard. What the hell am I? He muttered. Behind him, Nyla Corey's voice was grim. Something the Vorka should have never made. Zalvar's patience snapped. From the warship, his voice thundered across the battlefield. Enough. The ground shook as the first orbital cannon fired. A pillar of fire erupted in the distance, vaporizing city blocks. The second shot would be right on top of them. Go! Rourke shouted. Egan and the others sprinted for cover. The warship's cannons began to glow again, charging for the final shot. They had seconds. Dr. Corey's voice came through the comms. There's an exposed reactor core in that warship, if you can hit it, you can take the whole damn thing down. Rourke stared up at the sky. At the behemoth looming above them. One shot. That's all he had. He grabbed the fallen plasma rifle, calibrated its scope, and locked onto the warship's exposed core. He exhaled. steadied his aim. The cannon fired. So did Rourke. The explosion tore through the sky. The warship's core detonated, splitting the vessel apart. Fire and debris rained down as the Executor's fleet burned. For the first time in history, humanity had destroyed a Vorka capital warship. The battlefield went silent. The remaining Vorka forces hesitated. Their leader was dead. Their fleet was gone. And Captain Rourke Voss was still standing. He turned to them, bloodied but unbroken. "Run." The Vorka did. For the first time, they feared humanity. Dr. Nyla Corey stared at the burning wreckage. "I can't believe that worked." Rourke smirked. "I can." Egan limped up beside them, shaking his head. "Well, Captain, you sure as hell made history today." Rourke's grip tightened on his weapon. This wasn't history. He looked out at the ruins of Xiphos 9, at the sky still dark with Vorka ships. This was just the beginning. The Vorka never retreated. Not truly. They fell back only to regroup, to recalculate, to strike harder the next time. They didn't fear war. They were war. And now, for the first time in their history, they feared a single human. Rourke stood on the smoldering battlefield, the wreckage of the Vorka warship still burning behind him. The air was thick with the stench of charred alien metal and vaporized flesh. The last remnants of the Vorka ground forces had fled into the ruins, their morale shattered. But this wasn't over. Not even close. Dr. Nyla Corey moved beside him, her fingers flying across her data slate, scanning the wreckage for anything useful. This was their forward fleet, she muttered, but it wasn't their only fleet. Rourke kept his gaze on the sky. Zalvar's dead. That means command falls to his second. She shot him a grim look. Executor Jakar. The name alone made Egan swear. That psychotic bastard? Jakar wasn't like Zalvar. He wasn't a warlord, a tactician, or a commander. He was a purifier. His method of war didn't involve conquest or strategy. He didn't subjugate worlds. He cleansed them. If Jakar was coming, then Xiphos 9 was already considered a lost cause. The Vorka wouldn't fight for it anymore. They'd reduce it to ash. Above, in the cold dark of space, Jakar received the news. He listened in silence, his obsidian carapace gleaming under the dim light of his war chamber. His mandibles twitched as he studied the grainy footage of Captain Rourke Voss. The human had not only survived the toxin, he had adapted to it. The warship had not only been destroyed, it had been obliterated with a single, precise shot. Jakar hated anomalies. Deploy the Fleetborn. His advisors tensed. Executor, the Fleetborn are. Unleash them. If a single human was capable of breaking the Vorka, then the only solution was to wipe his species from existence. Jakar smiled as the Fleetborn legions prepared to descend. Burn it all. Back on the ground, the sky turned black. Egan was the first to see it, his bloodied face turning toward the horizon. Ah, hell! Dr. Corey's scanners screamed with incoming energy signatures. We've got multiple enemy signals inbound. Rourke had seen a lot of Vorka ships in his time. But the ones appearing in the upper atmosphere now? These were different. These were exterminators. Massive, organic-looking cruisers, alive with shifting armor plates and pulsing with red bioluminescence. The Fleetborn. Rourke's grip on his rifle tightened. How long until impact? Corey checked her readings. 15 minutes. Egan's voice was grim. They're not deploying ground troops this time, are they? Corey shook her head. No. This time, they're glassing the entire planet. Rourke didn't hesitate. We're leaving. Egan frowned. Where the hell are we gonna go? Rourke turned to Corey. You said the Vorka keep records on Project Revenant. If they knew about it, that means they studied it. She nodded slowly. Yes. Then there's a research facility somewhere. She stiffened. Rourke, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking. He met her gaze. We steal their data. We find out exactly what they did to me. Egan let out a low whistle. You really want to break into a Vorka research lab? Rourke reloaded his rifle. No. I want to burn it to the ground. Inside the Vorka warship, Jakar's patience thinned. The Fleetborn were descending, their weapons primed for annihilation. The humans had minutes before they were nothing more than dust. But something gnawed at him. A whisper of unease. He studied Rourke's face on the holodisplay. The human wasn't retreating. He was going somewhere. Jakar leaned forward, his mandibles clicking in amusement. Interesting. He tapped the controls. Deploy the trackers. I want to see where the rat is running. Rourke's team moved fast. Through crumbling city blocks, dodging collapsing structures, sprinting toward a half-buried Vorka data bunker. Corey's map led them through a rusted, forgotten war zone, littered with old human tech and Vorka corpses. Egan cursed under his breath. Place looks like a damn tomb. Corey pulled up the schematics. That's because it is. Rourke eyed the rusted Vorka insignia on a collapsed bunker wall. They lost something here, didn't they? Corey nodded. A warlord named Jator tried experimenting on humans decades ago. The project failed. He lost control. Rourke glanced at her. What happened to the test subjects? Corey's face darkened. No records. That was never a good sign. They reached the bunker just as the first orbital strikes hit. The sky ignited. Columns of fire vaporized the city behind them. Buildings collapsed in waves as the planet itself was turned to slag. The Fleetborn weren't just purging. They were rewriting the terrain. Egan swore. We need to hurry. Corey worked fast, hacking into the bunker's entrance system. Vorka code flooded her display. Come on, come on. The door slammed open. They rushed inside as the next orbital strike vaporized the ground behind them. Inside, the bunker was a graveyard. Corpses, human and Vorka alike, lined the rusted hallways. Ancient experiments, failed hybrids, twisted mutations. Corey scanned the room, pulling up a holographic database. Project Revenant, archive files located. Her breath caught. I found it. Rourke's jaw clenched. Download everything. Then, from the darkness, something moved. A shadow. A shape. Something not quite human. Egan raised his rifle. The hell was that? A low growl. Deep. Guttural. Wrong. Then, from the blackness, eyes opened. Not Vorka. Not human. Something else. And then it lunged.